I just wanted to make a label so that you could see at a glance what is supposed to be happening today. And it looks like it prints it all backwards, but let's see. So we're reading pages 19 to 37 of All the Light We Cannot See. I think this is book 1, 1934, which is 10 years earlier than what we read in the first reading. Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle. Marie-Laure Leblanc is a tall and freckled 6-year-old in Paris with rapidly deteriorating eyesight when her father sends her on a children's tour of the museum where he works. The guide is a hunchbacked old warder, hardly taller than a child himself. He raps the tip of his cane against the floor for attention, then leads his dozen charges across the gardens to the galleries. The children watch engineers use pulleys to lift a fossilized dinosaur femur. They see a stuffed giraffe in a closet, patches of hide wearing off its back. They peer into taxidermist drawers full of feathers and talons and glass eyeballs. They flip through 200-year-old herbarium sheets bedecked with orchids and daisies and herbs. Eventually, they climb 16 steps into the Gallery of Mineralogy. The guide shows them agate from Brazil and violet amethysts and a meteorite on a pedestal that he claims is as ancient as the solar system itself. Then he leads them single file down 2 twisting staircases and along several corridors and stops outside an iron door with a single keyhole. End of tour, he says. A girl says, "But what's through there?" Behind this door is another locked door, slightly smaller. "And what's behind that?" A third locked door, smaller yet. "What's behind that?" A fourth door, and a fifth, and on until you reach a 13th, a little locked door no bigger than a shoe. The children lean forward. And then, behind the 13th door, the guide flourishes one of his impossibly wrinkled hands, is the sea of flames. Puzzlement, fidgeting. "Come now, you've never heard of the Sea of Flames?" Oh, the children shake their heads. Marie-Laure squints up at the naked bulbs strung in 3-yard intervals along the ceiling. Each sets a rainbow-colored halo rotating in her vision. The guide hangs his cane on his wrist and rubs his hands together. "It's a long story. Do you want to hear a long story?" They nod. He clears his throat. Centuries ago, in the place we now call Borneo, a prince plucked a blue stone from a dry riverbed because he thought it was pretty. But on the way back to his palace, the prince was attacked by men on horseback and stabbed in the heart. "Stabbed in the heart? Is this true?" A boy says, "Shh." The thieves stole his rings, his horse, everything. But because a little blue stone was clenched in his fist, they did not discover it. And the dying prince managed to crawl home. Then he fell unconscious for 10 days. On the 10th day, to the amazement of his nurses, he sat up, opened his hand, and there was the stone. The Sultan's doctors said it was a miracle, that the prince never should have survived such a violent wound. The nurse said the stone must have healing powers. The Sultan's jewels said something else. They said the stone was the largest raw diamond anyone had ever seen. Their most gifted stone cutter spent 80 days faceting it. And when he was done, it was a brilliant blue, the blue of tropical seas. But it had a touch of red at its center, like flames inside a drop of water. The Sultan had the diamond fitted into a crown for the prince, and it was said that when the young prince sat on his throne and the sun hit him just so, he became so dazzling that visitors could not distinguish his figure from light itself. "Are you sure this is true?" asked the girl. "Shh," says the boy. The stone came to be known as the Sea of Flames. Some believed the prince was a deity, that as long as he kept the stone, he could not be killed. But something strange began to happen. The longer the prince wore his crown, the worse his luck became. In a month, he lost a brother to drowning and a second brother to snake bite. Within 6 months, his father died of disease. To make matters even worse, the Sultan's scouts announced that a great army was gathering in the east. The prince called together his father's advisors. All said he should prepare for war, all but one, a priest, who said he'd had a dream. In the dream, the goddess of the earth told him she'd made the Sea of Flames as a gift for her lover, the god of the sea, and was sending the jewel to him through the river. But when the river dried up and the prince plucked it out, the goddess became enraged. She cursed the stone and whoever kept it. Every child leans forward, Marie-Laure along with them. The curse was this: the keeper of the stone would live forever, but so long as he kept it, misfortunes would fall on all those he loved, one after another, in unending rain. Live forever? But if the keeper threw the diamond into the sea, thereby delivering it to its rightful recipient, the goddess would lift the curse. So the prince, now Sultan, thought for 3 days and 3 nights and finally decided to keep the stone. It had saved his life. He believed it made him indestructible. He had the tongue cut out of the priest's mouth. "Ouch," said the youngest boy. "Big mistake," said the tallest girl. "The invaders came," says the warder, "and destroyed the palace and killed everyone they found, and the prince was never seen again. And for 200 years, no one heard any more about the Sea of Flames." Some said the stone was recut into many smaller stones. Others said the prince still carried the stone, that he was in Japan or Persia, that he was a humble farmer, that he never seemed to grow old. And so the stone fell out of history until one day when a French diamond trader during a trip to the Golconda mines in India was shown a massive pear-cut diamond, 123 carats, near perfect clarity, as big as a pigeon's egg, he wrote, and as blue as the sea, but with a flare of red at its core. He made a casting of the stone and sent it to a germ-crazy duke in Lorraine, warning him of the rumors of a curse. But the duke wanted the diamond very badly, so the trader brought it to Europe, and the duke fitted it into the end of a walking stick and carried it everywhere. Uh-oh! Within a month, the duchess contracted a throat disease. 2 of their favorite servants fell off the roof and broke their necks. Then the duke's only son died in a riding accident. Though everyone said the duke himself had never looked better, he became afraid to go out, afraid to accept visitors. Eventually, he was so convinced that his stone was the accursed Sea of Flames that he asked the king to shut it up in his museum on the conditions that it be locked deep inside a specifically built vault and the vault not be opened for 200 years. and 196 years have passed. All the children remained quiet a moment. Several do math on their fingers. Then they raise their hands as one. Can we see it? No. Not even open the first door? No. Have you seen it? I have not. So how do you know it's really there? You have to believe the story. How much is it worth, monsieur? Could it buy the Eiffel Tower? A diamond as large and rare could, in all likelihood, buy 5 Eiffel Towers. Gasps. Are all those doors to keep thieves from getting in? Maybe, the guide says and winks. They're there to keep the curse from getting out. The children fall quiet. 2 or 3 take a step back. Marie-Laure takes off her eyeglasses and the world goes shapeless. Why not, she asks, just take the diamond and throw it into the sea? The warder looks at her. The other children look at her. When is the last time, one of the older boys says, you saw someone throw 5 Eiffel Towers into the sea? There's laughter. Marie-Laure frowns. It is just an iron door with a brass keyhole. The tour ends and the children disperse and Marie-Laure is reinstalled in the grand gallery with her father. He straightens her glasses on her nose and plucks a leaf from her hair. Did you have fun, ma chérie? A little brown house sparrow swoops out of the rafters and lands on the tiles in front of her. Marie-Laure holds out an open palm. The sparrow tilts his head, considering. Then it flaps away. 1 month later, she is blind. Zollverein. Werner Pfennig grows up 300 miles northeast of Paris in a place called Zollverein, a 4,000-acre coal mining complex outside Essen, Germany. It's steel country, anthracite country, a place full of holes. Smokestacks fume and locomotives trundle back and forth on elevated conduits, and leafless trees stand atop slag heaps like skeleton hands shoved up from the underworld. Werner and his younger sister Jutta are raised at Children's House, a clinker brick 2-story orphanage on Victoriastrasse, whose rooms are populated with the coughs of sick children and the crying of newborns and battered trunks inside which drowse the last possessions of deceased parents. Patchwork dresses, tarnished wedding cutlery, faded ambrotypes of fathers swallowed by the mines. Werner's earliest years are the leanest. Men brawl over jobs outside the Zollverein gates, and chicken eggs sell for 2 million Reichsmarks apiece, and rheumatic fever stalks Children's House like a wolf. There's no butter or meat. Fruit is a memory. Some evenings, during the worst month, all the house directress has to feed her dozen wards are cakes made from mustard powder and water. But 7-year-old Werner seems to float. He is undersized, and his ears stick out, and he speaks with a high, sweet voice. The whiteness of his hair stops people in their tracks. Snowy, milky, chalky. A color that is the absence of color. Every morning he ties his shoes, packs newspaper inside his coat as insulation against the cold, and begins interrogating the world. He captures snowflakes, tadpoles, hibernating frogs. He coaxes bread from bakers with none to sell. He regularly appears in the kitchen with fresh milk for the babies. He makes things too. Paper boxes, crude biplanes, toy boats with working rudders. Every couple of days, he'll startle the directress with some unanswerable query. Why do we get hiccups, Frau Elena? Or If the moon is so big, Frau Elena, how come it looks so little? Or, Frau Elena, does a bee know if it's going to die if it stings somebody? Frau Elena is a Protestant nun from Alsace who is more fond of children than of supervision. She sings French songs in a screechy falsetto, harbors a weakness for sherry, and regularly falls asleep standing up. Some nights she lets the children stay up late while she tells them stories in French about her girlhood, cozied up against mountains, snow 6 feet deep on rooftops, town criers and creeks smoking in the cold, and frost-dusted vineyards. A Christmas carol world. Can deaf people hear their heartbeat, Frau Elena? Why does glue stick to the inside of the bottle, Frau Elena? She'll laugh. She'll tousle Werner's hair. She'll whisper, "They say you're too little, Werner, that you're from nowhere, that you shouldn't dream big. But I believe in you. I think you'll do something great." Then she'll send him up to the little cot he has claimed for himself in the attic, pressed up beneath the window of a dormer. Sometimes he and Jutta draw. His sister sneaks up to Werner's cot, and together they lie on their stomachs and pass a single pencil back and forth. Jutta, though she is 2 years younger, is the gifted one. She loves most of all to draw Paris, a city she has seen in exactly one photograph on the back cover of one of Frau Elena's romance novels. Mansard roofs, hazy apartment blocks, the iron lattice of a distant tower. She draws twisting white skyscrapers, complicated bridges, flocks of figures beside a river. Other days, in the hours after lessons, Werner tows his little sister through the mine complex in a wagon he has assembled from cast-off parts. They rattle down the long gravel lanes, past pit cottages and trash barrel fires, past laid-off miners squatting all day on upturned crates, motionless as statues. One wheel regularly clunks off, and Werner crouches patiently beside it, threading back the bolts. All around them, the figures of second-shift workers shuffle into warehouses, while first-shift workers shuffle home. Hunched, hungry, blue-nosed, their faces like black skulls beneath their helmets. "Hello," Werner will chirp. "Good afternoon." But the miners usually hobble past without much replying, perhaps without even seeing him. Their eyes on the muck, the economic collapse of Germany looming over them like the severe geometry of the mills. Werner and Jutta sift through glistening piles of black dust. They clamber up mountains of rusting machines. They tear berries out of brambles and dandelions out of fields. Sometimes they manage to find potato peels or carrot greens in trash bins. Other afternoons they collect paper to draw on, or old toothpaste tubes from which the last dregs can be squeezed out and dried into chalk. Once in a while, Werner tows Jutta as far as the entrance to Pit 9, the largest of the mines, wrapped in noise, lit like the pilot at the center of a gas furnace, a 5-story coal elevator crouched over it, cables swinging, hammers banging, men shouting, an entire map full of pleated and corrugated industry stretching into the distance on all sides. And they watch the coal cars trundling up from the earth and the miners spilling out of the warehouses with their lunch pails toward the mouth of the elevator, like insects toward a lighted trap. "Down there," Werner whispers to his sister, "that's where Father died." As night falls, Werner pulls little Jutta wordlessly back through the close-set neighborhoods of Zollverein. 2 snowy-haired children in a bottomland of soot, bearing their paltry treasures to Victoria Strasse 3, where Frau Elena stares into the coal stove, singing a French lullaby in a tired voice, one toddler yanking her apron strings while another howls in her arms. Key pound. Congenital cataracts, bilateral, irreparable. Can you see this? Asked the doctors. Can you see this? Marie-Laure will not see anything for the rest of her life. Spaces she once knew as familiar, the 4-room flat she shares with her father, the little tree-lined square at the end of their street, have become labyrinths bristling with hazards. Drawers are never where they should be. The toilet is an abyss. A glass of water is too near, too far. Her fingers too big, always too big. What is blindness? Where there should be a wall, her hands find nothing. Where there should be nothing, a table leg gouges her shin. Cars growl in the streets, leaves whisper in the sky. Blood rustles through her inner ears. In the stairwell, in the kitchen, even beside her bed, grown-up voices speak of despair. Oh, poor child, poor Monsieur Leblanc. Hasn't had an easy road, you know. His father dead in the war, his wife dead in childbirth, and now this. Like they're cursed. Look at her, look at him. Ought to send her away. Those are months of bruises and wretchedness, rooms pinching like sailboats, half-open doors striking Marie-Laure's face. Her only sanctuary is in bed, the hem of her quilt at her chin, while her father smokes another cigarette in the chair beside her, whittling away at one of his tiny models, his little hammer going tap, 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 his little square of sandpaper making a rhythmic, soothing rasp. The despair doesn't last. Marie-Laure is too young, and her father is too patient. There are, he assures her, no such thing as curses. There's luck, maybe bad or good, a slight inclination of each day toward success or failure, but no curses. 6 mornings a week, he wakes her before dawn, and she holds her arms in the air while he dresses her. Stockings, dress, sweater. If there's time, he makes her try to knot her shoes herself. Then they drink a cup of coffee together in the kitchen, hot, strong, as much sugar as she wants. At 6:40, she collects her white cane from the corner, loops a finger through the back of her father's belt, and follows him down 4 flights and up 6 blocks to the museum. He unlocks entrance number 2 at 7 sharp. Inside are the familiar smells, typewriter ribbons, waxed floors, rock dust. There are the familiar echoes of their footfalls crossing the grand gallery. He greets a night guard, then a warder, always the same 2 words repeated back. Bonjour, bonjour. 2 lefts, 1 right. Her father's key ring jangles. A lock gives way. A gate swings open. Inside the key pound, inside 6 glass-fronted cabinets, thousands of iron keys hang from pegs. There are blanks and skeletons, barrel stem keys, and Saturn bow keys. Elevator keys and cabinet keys, keys as long as Marie-Laure's forearm, and keys shorter than her thumb. Marie-Laure's father is principal locksmith for the National Museum of Natural History. Between the laboratories, warehouses, 4 separate public museums, the menagerie, the greenhouses, the acres of medicinal and decorative gardens in the Jardin des Plantes, and a dozen gates and pavilions, her father estimates there are 12,000 locks in the entire museum complex. No one else knows enough to disagree. So between all those places, there are 12,000 locks. All morning, he stands at the front of the key pound and distributes keys to employees. Zookeepers coming first, office staff arriving in a rush around 8, technicians and librarians and scientific assistants trooping in next, scientists trickling in last. Everything is numbered and color-coded. Every employee, from custodians to the director, must carry his key at all times. No one is allowed to leave his respective building with keys, and no one is allowed to leave keys on a desk. The museum possesses priceless jade from the 13th century, after all, and canvasite from India, and rhodochrosite from Colorado. Behind a lock her father has designed sits a Florentine dispensary bowl carved from lapis lazuli that specialists travel 1,000 miles every year to examine. Her father quizzes her. Vault key or padlock key, Marie? Cupboard key or deadbolt key? He tests her on the locations of displays on the contents of cabinets. He is continually placing some unexpected thing into her hand. A light bulb, a fossilized fish, a flamingo feather. For an hour each morning, even Sundays, he makes her sit over a Braille workbook. A is 1 dot in the upper corner. B is 2 dots in a vertical line. Jean goes to the baker. Jean goes to the cheese maker. In the afternoons, he takes her on his rounds. He oils latches, repairs cabinets, polishes escutcheons. He leads her down hallway after hallway, into gallery after gallery. Narrow corridors open into immense libraries. Glass doors give way to hothouses overflowing with smells of hummus, wet, newspaper, and lobelia. There are carpenters' shops, taxidermist studios, acres of shelves and specimen drawers, whole museums within the museum. Humus, that's thick, peat-like, spongy earth. Humus. Some afternoons, he leaves Marie-Laure in the laboratory of Dr. Geffard, an aging mollusk expert whose beard smells permanently of damp wool. Dr. Geffard will stop whatever he's doing and open a bottle of Malbec and tell Marie-Laure in his whispery voice about reefs he visited as a young man, the Seychelles, Belize, Zanzibar. He calls her Laurette. He eats a roasted duck every day at 3 p.m. His mind accommodates a seemingly inexhaustible catalog of Latin binomial names. On the back wall of Dr. Geffard's labs are cabinets that contain more drawers than she can count, and he lets her open them one after another and holds seashells in her hands, whelks, olives, imperial volutes from Thailand, spider conchs from Polynesia. The museum possesses more than 10,000 specimens, over half the known species in the world, and Marie-Laure gets to handle most of them. Now that shell, Laurette, belongs to a violet sea snail, a blind snail that lives its whole life on the surface of the sea. As soon as it is released into the ocean, it agitates the water to make bubbles and binds those bubbles with mucus and builds a raft. Then it blows around, feeding on whatever floating aquatic invertebrates it encounters. But if it ever loses its raft, it will sink and die. A carionaria shell is simultaneously light and heavy, hard and soft, smooth and rough. The murex Dr. Gefford keeps on his desk can entertain her for half an hour. The hollow spines, the ridged whorls, the deep entrance. It's a forest of spikes and caves and textures. It's a kingdom. Her hands move ceaselessly, gathering, probing, testing. The breast feathers of a stuffed and mounted chickadee are impossibly soft, its beak as sharp as a needle. The pollen at the tips of tulip anthers is not so much powder as it is tiny balls of oil. To really touch something she is learning, the bark of a sycamore tree in the gardens, a pinned stag beetle in the Department of Entomology, the exquisitely polished interior of a scallop shell in Dr. Geffard's workshop, is to love it. At home in the evenings, her father stows their shoes in the same cubby, hangs their coats on the same hooks. Marie-Laure crosses 6 evenly spaced friction strips to the kitchen tiles to reach the table. She follows a strand of twine he has threaded from the table to the toilet. He serves dinner on a round plate and describes the locations of different foods by the hands of a clock. Potatoes at 6 o'clock, ma chérie. Mushrooms at 3. Then he lights a cigarette and goes to work on his miniature workbench in the corner of the kitchen. Then he lights a cigarette and goes to work on his miniatures at a workbench in the corner of the kitchen. He's building a scale model of their entire neighborhood. The tall windowed houses, the rain gutters, the laverie and the boulangerie, and the little place at the end of the street with its 4 benches and 10 trees. On warm nights, Marie-Laure opens her bedroom window and listens to the evening as it settles over the balconies and gables and chimneys, languid and peaceful, until the real neighborhood and the miniature one get mixed up in her mind. Tuesdays, the museum is closed. Marie-Laure and her father sleep in. They drink coffee thick with sugar. They walk to the Pantheon. They walk to the Pantheon, or to a flower market, or along the Seine. Every so often they visit the bookshop. He hands her a dictionary, a journal, a magazine full of photographs. How many pages, Marie-Laure? She runs a nail along the edge. 52? 705? 139? He sweeps her hair back from her ears. He swings her above his head. He says she is un merveillant. He says he will never leave her, not in a million years. Radio. Werner is 8 years old and ferreting about in the refuse behind a storage shed when he discovers what looks like a large spool of thread. It consists of a wire-wrapped cylinder sandwiched between 2 discs of pine wood. 3 frayed electrical leads sprout from the top. One has a small earphone dangling from its end. Jutta, 6 years old with a round face and a mashed cumulus of white hair, crouches beside her brother. What is that? I think, Werner says, feeling as though some cupboard in the sky has just opened, we just found a radio. Until now, he has seen radios only in glimpses. A big cabinet wireless through the lace curtain of an official's house, a portable unit in a miner's dormitory, another in the church refectory. He's never touched one. He and Jutta smuggle the device back to Victoriastrasse 3 and appraise it beneath an electric lamp. They wipe it clean, untangle the snarl of wires, wash mud out of the earphone. It does not work. Other children come and stand over them and marvel, then gradually lose interest and conclude it is hopeless. But Werner carries the receiver up to his attic dormer and studies it for hours. He disconnects everything that will disconnect. He lays its parts out on the floor and holds them one by one to the light. 3 weeks after finding the device on a sun-gilded afternoon when perhaps every other child in Zollverein is outdoors, he notices that its longest wire, a slender filament coiled hundreds of times around the central cylinder, has several small breaks in it. Slowly, meticulously, he unwraps the coil, carries the entire looped mess downstairs, calls Jutta inside to hold pieces for him while he splices the breaks. Then he rewraps it. "Now let's try," he whispers, and presses the earphone against his ear, and runs what he has decided must be the tuning pin back and forth across the coil. He hears a frizz of static. Then, from somewhere deep inside the earpiece, a stream of consonants issues forth. Werner's heart pauses. The voice seems to echo in the architecture of his head. The sound fades as quickly as it came. He shifts the pin a 1/4 inch. More static, another 1/4 inch. Nothing. In the kitchen, Frau Elena kneads bread. Boys shout in the alley. Werner guides the tuning pin back and forth. Static, static. He's about to hand the earphones to Jutta when, clear and unblemished about halfway down the coil, he hears the quick, drastic strikes of a bow dashing across the strings of a violin. He tries to hold the pin perfectly still. A second violin joins in. Jutta drags herself closer. She watches her brother with outsized eyes. A piano chases the violins, then woodwinds. The strings sprint, woodwinds fluttering behind. More instruments join in. Flutes? Harps? The song races, seems to loop back over itself. "Werner!" Jutta whispers. He blinks. He has to swallow back tears. The parlor looks the same as it always has. 2 cribs beneath 2 Latin crosses, dust floating in the open mouth of the stove, a dozen layers of paint peeling off the baseboards, a needlepoint of Frau Elena's snowy Alsatian village above the sink. Yet now, there's music, as if inside Werner's head an infinitesimal orchestra has stirred to life. The room seems to fall into a slow spin. His sister says his name more urgently, and he presses the earphone to her ear. "Music," she says. He holds the pin as stock still as he can. The signal is weak enough that, though the earphone is 6 inches away, he can't hear any trace of the song. But he watches his sister's face, motionless except for her eyelids, and in the kitchen, Frau Elena holds her flower-whitened hands in the air and cocks her head, studying Werner, and 2 older boys rush in and stop, sensing some change in the air, and the little radio with its 4 terminals and trailing aerial sits motionless on the floor between them all, like a miracle. Take us home. Usually, Marie-Laure can solve the wooden puzzle boxes her father creates for her birthdays. Often, they're shaped like houses and contain some hidden trinket. Opening them involves a cunning series of steps. Find a seam with your fingernails. Slide the bottom to the right. Detach a side rail. Remove a hidden key from inside the rail. Unlock the top and discover a bracelet inside. For her 7th birthday, a tiny wooden chalet stands in the corner of the kitchen table where the sugar bowl ought to be. She slides a hidden drawer out of the base, finds a hidden compartment beneath the drawer, takes out a wooden key, and slots the key inside the chimney. Inside waits a square of Swiss chocolate. 4 minutes, says her father, laughing. I'll have to work harder next year. For a long time, though, unlike his puzzle boxes, his model of their neighborhood makes little sense to her. It's not like the real world. The miniature intersection of Rue de Mirbel and Rue Monge, for example, just a block from their apartment, is nothing like the real intersection. The real one presents an amphitheater of noise and fragrance. In the fall, it smells of traffic and castor oil, bread from the bakery, camphor from Avant's pharmacy, camphor from Avant's pharmacy, delphiniums and sweet peas and roses from the flower stand. On winter days, it swims with the odor of roasting chestnuts. On summer evenings, it becomes slow and drowsy, full of sleepy conversations and the scraping of heavy iron chairs. But her father's model of the same intersection smells only of dried glue and sawdust. Its streets are empty, its pavements static. To her finger, it serves as little more than a tiny and insufficient facsimile. He persists in asking Marie-Laure to run her fingers over it, to recognize different houses, the angles of streets. And one cold Tuesday in December, when Marie-Laure has been blind for over a year, her father walks her up Rue Cuvier to the edge of the Jardin des Plantes. Here, ma chérie, is the path we take every morning. Through the cedars up ahead is the grand gallery. I know, Papa. He picks her up and spins her around 3 times. Now, he says, you're going to take us home. Her mouth drops open. I want you to think of the model, Marie. But I can't possibly. I'm 1 step behind you. I won't let anything happen. You have your cane. You know where you are. I do not. You do. Exasperation. She cannot even say if the gardens are ahead or behind. Calm yourself, Marie. 1 centimeter at a time. It's far, Papa. 6 blocks at least. 6 blocks is exactly right. Use logic. Which way should we go first? The world pivots and rumbles. Crows shout. Brakes hiss. Someone to her left bangs something metal with what might be a hammer. She shuffles forward until the tip of her cane floats in space. The edge of a curb, a pond, a staircase, a cliff. She turns 90 degrees, 3 steps forward. Now her cane finds the base of a wall. Papa! I'm here. 6 paces, 7 paces, 8. A roar of noise. An exterminator just leaving a house. Pump, bellowing, overtakes them. 12 paces further on, the bell tied around the handle of a shop door rings, and 2 women come out, jostling her as they pass. Marie-Laure drops her cane. She begins to cry. Her father lifts her, holds her to his narrow chest. It's so big, she whispers. You can do this, Marie. She cannot. And that's page 37, the end of our reading for today. There's snow outside, and I'm going to have to go out and shovel it. Until tomorrow. À demain.